Thank you all for sticking around and joining us for the question and answer session. And we'll still take questions if you want to bring them up. We'll start with Mr. John Deeker from Bombardier. And this question first threw me off, but it says, what labor demands will the aircraft industry experience, and are area resources able to meet it? With workers, I guess.
I'm not sure I understand the question either.
What labor demands will the aircraft industry experience, and are area resources able to meet it?
So if the question is pertaining to the local skills enhancement base from the relationships we have with the local and state government down through the educational entities, if you look at the engineering candidates that come out of Wichita State, it's phenomenal. The research that goes on in NIAR is a big piece of why this cluster is where it's at. And then when you add WATC in the National Center for Aviation Training to the mix, we now have a complete circle that actually enhances where we're at. You throw into that mix the third-party suppliers, the people like Harlow Air, Yingling, that keeps those skills here. It makes it more attractive for us to be here and do business. So I think that having that support locally is what improves the technological, intellectual capabilities of our community and makes it more viable for us to do business.
Thank you. And Jeremy, this kind of leads to you about a mismatch of skills in the labor force and the jobs. What industries in Wichita are most impacted by a mismatch in skills?
Well, we've actually looked at the unemployment insurance claims. Let me first give a comment that of those people unemployed, the largest relative increase is people with high school and GED degrees. That's where we have the biggest excess, then with people with less than high school. For sectors, some of those mismatches are cyclical, some of them are structural. For example, construction, we have a lot of people who are unemployed there, but that's because the economy's down. When you look at manufacturing, back to what they're saying, just a year and a half ago, we were talking about a mismatch. We had some engineers available for work, but companies were telling us that was not the engineer that they really needed or wanted. They needed someone with more experience or a specific skill set. So there's a little bit of mismatch. We have production workers that are in excess right now in this local economy. They're out there trying to get reemployed. And part of that is because the economy's down, and part of it is because we've eliminated a lot of the hand touch component of aviation from my perspective. So most of it's down because of the economy, but there are some segments that are a little bit of a structural change.
Thank you. Our next question for Jim Glassman: will tax cuts for business really stimulate growth when business is holding on to so much cash already?
Yeah, obviously, raising taxes is not going to generate growth. So we are losing some ground against our global competitors on the tax front, and I think, frankly, what we Americans need to recognize is that we economists don't know who all pays the corporate tax: customers, workers, shareholders, credit holders. Really, everybody does. So, to me, the big challenge that we face in this country is a long-run challenge of trying to rev up our underlying growth rate, and we need to do everything we can to try to speed up our underlying growth potential. And frankly, making business tax cut, a smart approach to business tax cuts, is a way of saying we need to rev up our economy, and doing whatever it takes to get the business community on the move is going to help. The high profit margin really is more a story about we've come through a very scary period. Everybody froze. They got to fixing things. This is not a natural, normal thing. Eventually it's going to settle down. And unlike what happens in Washington, the first instinct that a business has when they restore profitability is not to go out and spend money. So it takes time to reinvest in the smart way.
You talked about the economy being in the fourth inning, the labor market recovery. What do you think it'll take to keep the economy moving forward and then speed up?
Frankly, I think a lot of things have already happened that are happening. I mean, we economists don't do a very good job forecasting recessions. But when you look at all these stumbles we make, there's a common thread through all of them. First, you fix problems, then you restore your health, you get more efficient, and you get focused on looking for opportunities. And those are all things that are happening. And frankly, I think we don't need easier monetary policy, frankly. We don't need more government spending. The private sector is already on the move. So I think we just have a little patience and get the uncertainty around this fiscal cliff issue behind us. And I think you'll see there's a lot in motion already that's going to make this happen.
Thank you. Let's get somebody else involved. Mark Ruel from Westar. How does the cost of electricity in Kansas compare with the price of electricity in other states? Do we pay more than most states, less than most states, or are we about in the middle?
Well, we're not the lowest, but on average, we're lower than most places. There are other places where it's a little bit less, but there are some places where they're double or more. And part of that comes from the fact that we have this all of the above strategy. I know everybody likes to talk about that in Washington. We've actually sort of believed that for years, and I think the development of this humility about not being able to get it right, so we have to do a little of everything, comes from, decades in our industry of being humiliated by getting it wrong. And so, we just embrace the uncertainty of that all, and you can probably be assured that we're never going to be on the front of some business magazine characterized as a hero for getting it all right, and hopefully we'll never leave you in the dark paying more costs than in other places because we got it all wrong. So we just stick to the basics and do a little of all of it, and think that gives you the best solution in terms of both reliability and affordability.
We've talked a little bit about government. Another question for you, Mark. We usually think of regulations as bad for business. Are there any new or different energy regulations that you think would improve the industry?
I think the list of that is really small.
In Kansas, there's a little bit of controversy with our lawmakers about wind energy, whether the government should give tax breaks or supplements. Did that help Westar's investment in wind energy?
Well, of course, that's a controversial issue. Presumably you subsidize things that are infant industries you want to get going. Well, this is a 20-year project now of subsidizing renewable energy. And so I suppose, your definition of an infant might depend. Our view is that it's got a place in a portfolio. As I indicated, it has its advantages and disadvantages, like other forms of energy. We are going to comply with what the law requires, but we don't believe that it's some kind of a silver bullet or we should go all in with it. Frankly, in some states where the requirement is to have 30-some% of the electricity come from renewable, I don't know how you make that work either economically or physically. And so at the levels that we have it, it doesn't impair our reliability. I think the Kansas requirement that we have, the amount we have, is not a difficult engineering proposition. But if it were much higher, it could be. So, for example, you have places in Texas where the wholesale market for power is negative because the only reason these folks are producing is to get the subsidy. And so they're actually backing down more economically efficient resources because of this perverse signal that comes only from the subsidy. So, would we have the amount of wind we have in Kansas without the subsidy? No, we wouldn't. But we shouldn't assume that, if one aspirin is good, 20 are better. I think we have about the right balance in Kansas with the requirements that we have. We've been fortunate in that while renewable energy has typically been more expensive than traditional means, in Kansas it doesn't get cheaper than what we're able to get. The renewable energy we've been able to negotiate in Kansas is a fraction of what other places are paying for renewable energy. Jim and I were just visiting. New Jersey has a big solar program. Now, if you're like me, you don't think, New Jersey being the sunniest place in the world. But the cost to him as a utility customer is probably 3 times the cost that you pay for the wind that we've acquired. We've also been able to negotiate, there aren't many places you can do this, 20-year fixed price contracts for the most recent win that we signed up, and signed it up at some of the lowest prices for any renewable energy in the nation. So does it cause our costs to go up a little bit? Yes, and you're paying for that. But you can be assured that that increment is the smallest we can possibly make it. And I think we feel pretty good about that when we look at what other folks are doing and imposing on their utility customers.
Okay, thank you. Jeremy, which of the uncertainties that you mentioned in your presentation are the most concerning for the Wichita economy?
Well, again, I've already said sequestration. I'm really worried about that. I'm really worried about the hawker, and, well, not really worried. I think it has played a lot of worry on local businesses, and I think we'll overcome those uncertainties to that. And the other one that businesses have told me is that this retaliation, as I said, against the corporate CEO. We've got to improve that overall image so that we can move forward.
On Hawker, a question from the audience: what impact would you expect locally should a foreign firm purchase Hawker?
Well, that is actually a really good question. It's something that I've talked to some of the businesses about, of what might happen, and I'm not sure if we have a really good answer for that. However, let's look at the alternative. The alternative of them, while being foreign, of them, the first alternative of them even being purchased is that being laden with debt, right? They couldn't move forward and they couldn't recover. At least we have a company that's getting involved in them, and that they will be positioned when the market recovers that they can go and get their products out. They can hire more people to move forward. And I think, again, it comes back to the company's a good company with good products. We just have to move forward with that.
Thank you. For Jim Glassman, if banks are piling up excess reserves, what is to stop banks from lending excess reserves, thus creating money and inflation?
Banks are going to make loans based on the fundamentals of the project. So they don't make loans just because the Fed provides the money. If we make a loan and it turns out to be a bad loan, we're on the hook, not the Federal Reserve. So that's really what drives credit flows, is the need for funding. Frankly, bank credit is available, and we certainly have an awful lot of commitment to lending to small businesses. But you'll notice if bank borrowing is slow, it's because the economy's been slow. It's because a very big credit-using industry, the real estate industry, has been very slow to recover. And because companies are generating a lot of money internally, they can fund a lot of their projects from their own internal profits that they're generating. So that's really what drives the decision to make loans, is not what the Fed does. It's what the business community is doing and what our customers are doing.
Thank you. To John Deeker, what new research has the jet business done to improve fuel development and better engine output?
I think that improvement is already in process. There's the enhancements we're doing in the new Learjet 7075. The fuel efficiency of the engines that are going in that airplane are remarkably improved from what was on the 4045. It is the ability to manage costs. When our customers today talk to us, they talk about costs of operation and maintenance costs. I think those are the supreme attributes that drive that technology enhancement. Being able to manage your asset, to control your operating revenues is a huge piece of why you do that. And that is the biggest influence of where we go.
Can you talk a little bit about why Bombardier has stayed in Wichita, and in fact you have an expansion going on right now with the state of the local economy, and why you're here?
Sure, I'd be glad to. If you think back at Learjet, Bombardier was acquired in the early 90s or 1990, but Learjet's been here for be 50 years next October. The first flight of a Learjet will celebrate in October 2013. We have a legacy here, but when you consider all that's here and the other OEMs and the expertise that exists in this population, there's good reasons to stay here. The value that's in the employee base, the educational opportunities that keep the citizens available for jobs in our industry is a big piece. They are a valuable asset for what we do and where we go forward, and to try to take that intellectual property and go somewhere else. There was conversation here a year or so ago about Louisiana wanting to take a whole bunch of jobs and throw a whole bunch of money and move a company out, and I'll leave the company nameless. But that's almost an impossible thing to do when you think about the intellectual property that goes with that, and you start moving them people out of here. So the intellectual property that exists in this community is a huge reason why it's here. Now, it's easy to lose. There's only 5 aviation clusters in the world, but it's something we should be very proud of and we should protect.
Thank you. A lot of questions about energy, back to Mark Ruel. And this is also open to the panel. Please talk about what the need is for additional coal plants.
Well, I'll start, and then I'll see if my colleagues can enlighten me. As I indicated, our newest coal plant is 30 years old, actually over 30 years old. We have no present plans to build more coal plants. And it is fortunate that, at least for the near term, natural gas looks pretty affordable. So for incremental demand, I don't think there'll be much, if any, demand for new coal plants based on just the prevailing economics. Now, let me overlay the regulatory model. The present air quality regulatory model coming out of Washington basically makes it impossible to build another coal plant in this country. I'm sure there might be some niche possibility that someone could say, well, you're not telling the truth because you could. I'll make it simpler. Westar cannot conceive of a way that we could build another coal plant today. And that was, frankly, that was part of our decision and went into the calculus of, do we invest in these 30-year-old coal plants to keep them reliable and cleaner for decades, knowing that, at least as the law stands today, they're an incredibly scarce resource that is irreplaceable. And if you shut one down, even for a year or two, you've probably eliminated the chance to restart it and never use it again. So I don't think you should see a lot of them being built, unless and until there's a technological breakthrough that allows an economic basis for capturing and dealing with the carbon dioxide. A lot of people want to talk about, sequestration storage. Some of you folks probably know what it takes to get an injection well. I bet if I said, who wants to store carbon under their neighborhood, I could count the hands with not many fingers. And so I don't think you should expect to see any meaningful development of coal plants in the U.S. in the near term.
Thank you. Jim Glassman, what is the cause of the slow recovery? Do you have the slow recovery, the slow U.S. recovery? What do you believe?
Okay, if you ask what is different about this recovery compared with the past, well, this recovery looks an awful lot like the last two. But what's making everybody frustrated with it is we sort of had this idea in our mind that when you have a serious downturn, you expect to see a serious recovery, a strong recovery. Well, the problem is, if you look at what was the problem, it was all the excesses in the real estate industry and the overbuilding and the home building business. I've never seen a recovery. I don't know of a recovery in the 100 years of the data that we know where we have not had a housing recovery. Typically what happens, the Fed cuts rates, and the first industry that really feels it is the housing industry, and it comes back very quickly. And you get about a half a point to a full point of growth from the home building business when it's in recovery mode. Well, we haven't had that in this recovery. And because of the excesses from the last decade, it took time, it's taken the industry time to clean up the mess. And the only way you can clean up the mess is by underbuilding. So we've had no support from the housing industry. Well, that's about to change. That's begun to change this year, and it's one reason why we should be expecting, as the industry begins to normalize and home building activity needs to double basically to catch up to what our underlying needs are. That's why we should expect to see something more normal emerging. But you could find other things that are going on also. Some of it has to do with what's going on in Europe. But I think truly much of the problem is our own making, and it's related to mistakes from the last decade.
Thank you. To Jeremy, manufacturing has been a big driver for our regional economy for years, but it's been on the decline. What do you think will be future drivers of the Wichita economy?
Well, when you think about manufacturing, And although it's been on decline, we have to put it in perspective what's happened the last couple of decades. Right? We've had all this outsourcing in manufacturing. I've talked about it a few times. I think what's the real driver going forward is actually manufacturing. Our relative advantage here in the Midwest, here in Wichita, is a skilled labor force. It is still going to be a skilled labor force because our other MSAs have lost that. And since manufacturing, because this is of the value of the dollar long term, if you want to come back somewhere, this is the opportunity. That's where wealth will be created. I think there's some other segments that would be good. I think value-added manufacturing, agriculture manufacturing is also something that would be a good shift going forward. Because if you do that, you create wealth all the way down the whole supply chain. You create more wealth to the farmer. So there's a lot of pharmaceutical opportunities in manufacturing that would be good for this area. And there's a few others, but I think that would take up too much time. So I'll keep it that short.
Okay, and along those lines, what is Wichita doing to give incentives to startups to convince them to move here?
So what is
Any
Wichita
research on that?
Sure. What is Wichita doing? Well,
Yes.
the city and county actually agreed this summer for a new policy. They've changed it a little bit. And, the center does the fiscal impact on everything. And they have kept the line saying that it needs to have a positive return on investment. And I will say, in our role, which we look at, they're being very careful to make sure that any investment that comes in here, that when you take in some risk, that there's an opportunity to have a benefit. The point that everyone needs to realize, most communities don't even do that. So as all the all incentives, they can be creative in a lot of different ways. They are set, and there are policies that you can go and look up yourself. They've changed it a little bit this summer. But the point that really needs to come across is they're being very careful, and I think that's what bodes well for our economy in the long run. Other communities are going to have costs that they will have to deal with down the road.
We touched on this a little bit. Back to Jim Glassman. How does globalization affect the standing of the U.S. in tomorrow's global economy?
Yeah, I think a lot of people fear that they see these giants waking up in China, 1.4 billion people, and you fear, and I've seen covers on New York Times magazine, who shrank the giant. I think people have this idea that somehow the size of our economy is what gives us power. I think that's the wrong idea. I think what contributes, the influence that we have, the impact we have on the world, comes from how innovative are we, how creative are we, how much do we encourage people to take risk, build a business, try an idea. If you fail, it's not a big deal. And I really think, personally, I think the globalization that's happening, of course, we don't like competition, but frankly, I think competition brings out the best of us. And I think the world that we're coming into is getting fiercely competitive, which is why I think I don't fear the U.S. ability, our ability to do what it takes to remain competitive. I haven't seen really, I think it remains to be seen whether systems like China and India can be innovative and create ideas and bring inventions that actually help human beings. Right now, they look an awful lot like made in America or maybe made in Europe. We see a lot of copying somewhere else, but we have not seen that the globalization is generating areas of new innovation. So I don't fear for the U.S. I think what is taking place globally is an opportunity for the U.S., and I think we know how this is what we are about. We are about rising to the occasion, reinventing ourselves. We know how to be competitive, and I think that's what's ahead of us.
And as John said, it's an opportunity for the aircraft business too, globalization. Oh, there you go. I think it's on.
Globalization is the future for us. I think it also has a huge impact. We talk about the Wichita economy, and we look at our current industry of aviation. There is financing available today that wasn't 3 years ago. There are opportunities. Jeremy talked about the wait-and-see attitude. That wait-and-see attitude to see what happens in the rest of the world, because the consumers that purchase big-ticket items like business jets are doing business globally. And it's the confidence in the global market that gives them the confidence to make the purchase, and that purchase stimulates the economy here in Wichita. So it is a global concern that the confidence in the global GDP improve and go forward.
Jeremy, this one's for you. Do you think inflation will be an issue within the next 5 years?
Well, obviously, according to most, are we gone? Okay. According to most economists, inflation is not going to be an issue, obviously, next year, and probably not the year after. Again, as I said in the presentation, which is a little bit different view from Glassman, as you soak up all this liquidity, the only other example we've had it was during the Great Depression. And so how well the Federal Reserve will do that is suspicious. The question that I think will impact consumers or businesses is if it is volatile. Now we're getting a little bit of reverb. If we have inflation that goes up and down, which I think was really likely to happen, businesses really don't know when to buy, when to sell, and they could completely lose profits just because of not knowing that. We've had such a stable environment for a long time that is an uncertainty going forward. However, the Federal Reserve has gotten a lot better tools, and they might be able to interact a lot better and pull out at a more consistent pace. We'll wait and see.
And Jim, you have some thoughts on the Fed and the impact on inflation?
Yeah, I think, to me, in my mind, inflation is not something you fear. It's something that comes out of a robust, dynamic economy where the Fed is maybe too easy. We're living in a tough time. People are very budget constrained. A very low percentage of our people have jobs. So I don't think this is going to be an issue for us in the next 5 years. I have to tell you, I wish if someone told me, no, there's going to be an inflation issue emerging in several years, I have to tell you, in my heart, it would kind of warm me, because I think when I hear about potential inflation problems, I think before that can happen, we have to have a really dynamic, robust economy. You've got to have the demand to make that happen. So I don't think this is an issue right now. And the Fed is not. The Fed is a conservative institution, despite what you may think. They're, in my mind, the probability that what they have done, the reserves they are creating, will somehow magically be allowed to turn into money growth is a very low probability. They've got lots of tools for pulling that back. I think really what will drive this issue will be how quickly do we come back, how quickly do we get the country back to full employment. This is probably going to be an issue beyond 5 years, but not over the next 5 years.
You guys have done a really good job of answering questions quickly and answered our inquiring minds. I have one left, and it's for Mark. And this person wants to know, what Westar, does it use solar for electricity, and are there any indicators that consumer solar consumption is on the rise?
We don't have any at the utility scale yet. We're continuing to look at it. I will tell you that of all the renewable technologies, the one that seems to be advancing the most rapidly is solar. But even with the state of the art where it is today, can't touch the price of the wind energy that we can buy here. Now, there are some individuals that may, for their own reasons, put solar panels on their roof or their garage. And we have a program where we can help them do that and make sure that they do it safely. There's also a state incentive that allows them to be subsidized for doing it. So when your neighbor puts a solar panel on, you're paying more so that your neighbor gets paid for his solar panel. That's just the way it is. It's an infant industry argument. And they need to be hooked up right so you don't kill one of our line workers. I don't mean that facetiously. It's just any time you hook up a generator or even a gas-powered generator, you need to know how to do that because you can harm someone down the line. But the economics compared to the price of our grid power are still not there. But as I said, it's advancing, and it's advancing quickly. And in my remarks, I said that wind is still the cheapest at this point. But no, solar is one to watch. And there are places where the sun shines more, that may be, and maybe the wind doesn't blow, that it's actually more economic than wind. The Mojave Desert's a good place. But frankly, a lot of people don't know this, but you don't want a hot desert, you want a cold desert. Would be the best thing for most solar. But we haven't seen a lot of it here in this part of the country for the reasons that we just don't have that much sunshine relative to other places, and we have a much cheaper and more accessible wind resource.
Okay. And actually, I found one more in my pile, and this is for Jeremy. about the effect of Russia's recent entry into the World Trade Organization. Any comments on that?
I think Jim Glassman would be better for that one.
Okay. We'll pass it on.
Well, you know, China's entry in 2001 symbolically was a very big moment. It's hard to picture. I don't really understand Russia myself. And there are opportunities, and it's a big energy region, but honestly, it's hard to picture the Russian economy having the same impact on the global economy as we're seeing in China and parts of Asia.
Oh, we lost it. The growth's
go.
not there compared to China as well. I mean, I don't think the expected growth there is as much, and I don't know. I don't have any other perspectives, to be honest. I think we'd have to think about it and actually research before I'd step out any more bold comment. So.
Well, one thing I think you are learning when you watch what goes on around the world, you realize what makes America such a powerful place. Rule of law, lots of checks and balances. We do crazy things, but the Founding Fathers really invented a pretty incredible system. When you think about it, how it creeps through our whole system, you don't see that in places like Russia, and I think China has to show. It's not clear to me that it's not clear to any of us how China is going to be evolving as its citizens want more say, more freedom, more power. So I think that is one of our assets, and it's why I think it's pretty impressive. We've gone through a very brutal downturn. We see people living in tents in some places, but we don't see armed revolutions going on here like we do across the North Africa and through the Middle East. So I think that's an important message coming from a lot of this.
Even recently, in the last couple of years, and how it affect Kansas. I mean, Russia closed their economy with their wheat, and then that actually made wheat prices go up. That was beneficial to us. But there's one example of what you're talking about, how we're not really sure how they're going to interact. But that happened to be beneficial for Kansas. They closed it because they had a drought. Our prices went up, and we had higher incomes because of it. But I don't know any other details other than that. So.
Anybody else?
Question.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to all our speakers, and we appreciate the time that you've given us and the effort in making this program such a success. Let's give them all a round of applause, please.